Today on Hearts of Heroes, a parched landscape that holds a deadly and wet potential.
You'll have this rage of water that comes down the canyon.
A man hangs onto a slippery rock clinging to his 4-year-old cousin.
It was a matter of 3 or 4 seconds before we were submerged up to our chest.
This mission is nothing short of heart-stopping.
There was a fear that the water would rise and sweep them away.
And later, houses underwater after Hurricane Harvey tortures Southeast Texas. And 2 teenage brothers are about to learn what it takes to be called a hero.
We saw people on the roofs just screaming like for help at the top of their lungs.
It's an old saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Now, see it in action.
Most people don't think of dangerous water events when you think about the parched desert landscape of Arizona, right? But Arizona's actually known for flash flooding too, especially during monsoon season. Thankfully, Arizona's finest is trained for it all, and when the waters rise, they jump in to help. Tucson, Arizona and its suburbs are nestled amongst the mountains and low-lying deserts of America's striking Southwest.
We have the Sonoran Desert, so we range anywhere from 2,700 feet of desert, where it's extremely hot, up to 9,000 feet at Mount Lemmon, where we have pine trees and snow. Tanque Verde Falls is the furthest east Pima County that we have. It's a deep canyon where rainfall or snowfall from the Rincon Mountains and the Catalina Mountains merge together and create like a desert oasis.
Jorge Flores is quite familiar with desert life and its wild weather.
In Tucson, we don't really get a lot of flash floods. We do get a lot of rain during monsoon season. It could rain for 3 hours and then it'll be hot for the rest of the week.
But a chance decision to visit a nearby canyon would change Jorge's outlook on Mother Nature forever.
That day, it was sprinkling in the morning for like 2 hours and it cleared up. It was hot, humid, so we were bored and my cousin was like, let's just go.
The day started out pretty normal. Jorge and some friends and family headed out on an adventure to visit Tanque Verde Falls, a highly popular recreation area in the nearby Rincon Mountains. People there like to hike and play in the water.
You'll have several waterfalls, some that fall 40 feet, and a lot of people will go there and jump off the rock into these deep pools.
But Pima County Rescue Deputy Stephen West knows the dangers that lurk in this majestic canyon, especially in the summer months.
We have extreme heat. It'll get up to, 110, 112 degrees. You may not have rain for 2 weeks, and a monsoon will come in and create a heavy downpour of rain. Every monsoon season, we're rescuing somebody out there.
Monsoon season in Arizona is a natural wonder all its own, typically peaking mid-June through September. A monsoon is a seasonal shift in wind that ushers in moist tropical air over the usually arid desert. The moist air then flows up the mountainsides, forming large thunderstorms full of intense downpours.
It may not actually be raining in the area that you're at, but all that runs down into these canyons, and the next thing you know, you have a wall of water that you're dealing with.
As Jorge and his family arrived at Tanque Verde Falls, everything seemed fine.
As soon as I got there was a sign that said there may be flooding while rain, but there was no signs that really stood out saying that there's gonna be a flash flood.
Jorge even took his cousin's 4-year-old into the creek to play in the cool water.
It was like ankle-deep water, so he was having a good time just splashing around, and he wanted to keep going upstream. As soon as I picked him up and turned back around to go to my family, that's when all the water came and hit us.
Suddenly, Jorge and his tiny cousin faced a torrential wall of water, raging from a mountain storm.
It was a matter of like 3 or 4 seconds before we were submerged up to our chest underwater.
Jorge managed to climb onto a nearby rock, holding on to his little cousin and desperately wondering what to do.
Swift water rescuers tell us that many people simply underestimate the power of moving water. Rescue technicians don't go into anything over their knees. Sometimes it can be just 18 inches deep, but based on the velocity of the water, it'll just knock you right off your feet.
That was exactly what Jorge and the 4-year-old had just experienced, as they now held on for dear life. Jorge's cousin watched her family clinging to the rock and frantically called 911.
I can hear his mom actually screaming from the top of the ridge, says, hold on, tell him to stay still. And she was crying, everybody else was scared. At the time, I didn't know my sister's boyfriend was in the water with me.
Coming up, can first responders get to Jorge and his cousin in time?
There was a child exposed on a rock with rushing water all around, and the fear that the water would rise and sweep them away.
He looked at me and told me he was scared. At that point, I was just telling him, just hold on to him and that I won't let nothing happen to him.
But first,
Awareness and prevention are always going to be your best chance of surviving a flash flood.
Sign up ahead of time for local weather alerts and check forecasts to make sure you have a handle on what to expect if the weather is looking questionable. And take note of canyons, drainage channels, stream beds, and other low locations so you don't get caught.
Remember, a watch means flooding is possible, but a warning means flooding is already occurring. Just a little bit of knowledge could be the difference between a good day and a bad one.
the normally pristine and arid canyon known as Tanque Verde Falls is a popular spot for hikers and nature lovers in and around Tucson, Arizona. But on a hot mid-July day in 2017, the dry gorge turned into a rushing river. The National Weather Service had issued a flash flood warning, but Jorge Flores didn't see that warning.
We had a call come in from a female subject who was frantic, advising that her son and her cousin were on a rock stranded and hadn't seen him in 20 minutes.
Jorge and his 4-year-old cousin were clinging on for dear life.
He looked at me and told me he was scared and he was shivering and was too scared to let go. At that point, I was just telling him, just hold on to him and that I won't let nothing happen to him.
Jorge had no idea a team of heroes was on the way.
Of the rescue deputies that were down in, they could not get to the people on the rocks. They were stranded. The rapids were too severe to initiate any other way of rescue.
So an air rescue was the only way. Pilot Milt Kennedy, along with his team, Deputy Stephen West, and crew chief Tom Price, were Jorge's only hope.
In this particular circumstances or incident, the water was rising, so we knew we had to move quickly.
One man had the child on his shoulders and was behind the rock, using that rock as a shield, if you will.
We needed to affect that rescue right away, or they were going to be swept downstream.
The team knew that the best plan of action was using a hoist from the helicopter.
We utilized the hoist to be able to either lower a rescuer to the scene and or extricate that individual from a rugged or otherwise inaccessible area.
Utilizing a hoist in a rescue operation takes bravery and hundreds of hours of special training. The device is permanently attached to the helicopter, giving the team about 170 feet of cable, which is capable of lifting 500 pounds on the hoist itself.
But the helicopter must be steadied for the operation to happen.
Milt's checking wind. The winds weren't out of control. They weren't really swirling. It worked out well for him. He was able to just hold the ship as steady as could be. Tom's checking for hazards, high trees, anything that may be an issue on the hoist.
The team plans to rescue the 4-year-old first.
Our pilot, Milt, he cannot see what Tom is putting the rescue deputy down on. So it's a communication with Tom and Milt.
They went and they're hovering over us for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then I looked at my nephew and I said, I'm gonna hand you up to him so he can take you up with him. And he said, are you gonna be okay? And at the moment I was like, yes, I'm gonna be fine. And I was like, as long as you're safe.
Tom put me right on the rock. I mean, it couldn't have been any better.
But as soon as Steve was up, he went right back down for Jorge. the helicopter wavering dangerously close.
I was dangling on like a donut type hoop. They told me just to wrap it around my waist or hold onto it with my arms. I couldn't breathe the whole time I was going up. But as soon as I got to the safe dry land, it was a sigh of relief.
But the rescuers couldn't celebrate yet because it turned out that Jorge's sister's boyfriend was also in the forceful waters clinging to a different rock.
When they brought him up, they airlifted him to the same spot that I was at, got him in a blanket to keep him warm.
And there was more. The team would eventually need to rescue 14 other people stranded in the rushing water. Flash floods are fueled by sun and heat, so you always need to have a way to receive warnings. This Pima County rescue outcome was a success, even though Jorge Flores and his family never imagined that their first time visiting the wonder of Tanque Verde Falls would turn out even more dramatic than the vista.
Definitely the heroes from that day was the search and rescue team. I would tell them thank you for getting my nephew out, and thank you for saving us, making sure everybody was fine and putting their lives on the line for us, and I'd call them my hero for that.
Coming up after the break, when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, rescue teams could not have imagined the torrent of water that invaded. And in one neighborhood, two young brothers were about to be tested.
And all of a sudden, when people saw our boat, they started screaming and asking for help.
Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Texas as a Category 4 monster. Some suburbs more than 40 miles inland had catastrophic flooding. Now, all monsters have to face a hero at some point, and in our case, the heroes happen to be some good-willed teenagers. Let's check it out. Houston is the largest city in Texas. Their population, just under 2.5 million. But within this metropolis, there are some really quaint neighborhoods. Brothers Liam and Declan Connor grew up in just that type of neighborhood, called Meyerland.
It's an older neighborhood. It's one of the more original neighborhoods to Houston.
Everybody sort of knows each other. It's kind of one big family.
And that sense of community would be integral in their survival when Hurricane Harvey made landfall.
Once Harvey hit, a lot of people weren't prepared because we've never had that before and people didn't really believe it was gonna happen.
Harvey made landfall Saturday morning, wrecking parts of the coast. Then, meteorologists warned of this slow-moving storm that would bring epic inland flooding. The teens had friends over on Saturday night without a thought as to what might be coming their way.
It was raining really hard, but the streets weren't really flooded. And then around 10:30, 10:45, we saw there was some water in the streets.
We walk outside and there's already water up to our steps. All the streets are flooded. It just hit like that.
Everyone went to bed hoping for the best. Instead, they woke up to a nightmare.
So I went into the garage and it started, you could hear sounds like it was creaking like a boat. And then I looked and I saw every single thing in the garage floating, bumping into each other.
And then I just started seeing my dad's car practically underwater in the garage. And then it just it was here. Harvey had come.
The boys immediately realized that if their house was almost underwater, the neighbors must be in big trouble too.
We were looking down the street and we realized that we had to get on our boat and we had to do something.
15-year-old Declan had already been driving the family boat for a few years, but nothing had prepared him for what he'd see next.
Once we were driving around, it was just an awe, complete awe, seeing these people on the roofs, with babies yelling for help and screaming.
No one really thought that anything like Harvey could happen to Houston.
Coming up.
A neighbor from across the street had called and said that their friends needed to be rescued. It just kind of snowballed from there.
I remember getting on their boat and just rambling about how thankful I was that they had rescued my two kids.
But first, a tip to help you stay safe in a natural disaster.
If you need to evacuate, don't wait, go. It's imperative to heed the initiatives set forth by authorities to keep us all safe.
And try to carpool if possible. Wear appropriate clothing and take your already prepared go bag with you and use the travel routes set forth by local officials because shortcuts may be unsafe.
And if you're unable to get out, contact someone who can help. There are many agencies and first responders who are prepared, trained, and ready to assist.
When Hurricane Harvey slammed into Rockport, Texas in 2017, even those living more than 40 miles from the coast would feel its impacts.
All the streets are flooded, and it hit like that.
Meyerland was one of many suburbs of Houston submerged. Water had risen to rooftops, and Liam and Declan Connor were about to turn into neighborhood heroes.
My buddy across the street, she called and was like, hey, our neighbor, the Anders, they live in a one-story house. We have a two-story house. I see that you have your boat. Can you go and get them and bring them to our house?
The Connors had a small boat in the driveway. They fired it up, eager to help their neighbors and friends, the Anders family.
So our house is lifted 5 feet, and I knew once the water got past the brick that we had just added to the house after the lift, we were in trouble.
When floodwaters are rising, nothing is more terrifying. That's why safety experts suggest storing an axe inside the attic. Many people climb there for safety, but may need a way to bust through the roof to get out.
Aaron and Doug Anders decided it was unsafe to stay at home. With the water reaching more than 5 feet in the streets, they were left with one option: get out.
So the plan of action was, it's kind of funny when you look back at it now. We had gotten floats out of the pool the night before and brought them in the house. So we had several inner tubes.
The idea was to put the 2 kids, dogs, and some belongings on the pool tubes and then float down to their neighbor's 2-story house.
I kind of felt like it would kind of be fun, but then I was also kind of scared. And then when I got to the water, it was freezing cold.
The situation was anything but fun. Once in the water, the family floated uncontrollably. But luckily, the Connor brothers and their friends were on their way.
When we turned the corner to pick them up, we could see them kind of scattered. A couple of them are in floats. I remember the dad was standing, but barely, like he could barely stand. He was on his tippy toes.
I remember getting on their boat and just rambling about how thankful I was that they had rescued my 2 kids.
The boys dropped the Anders family at their friend's home, but it was by no means the end of their newly found mission.
We kind of expected to go help these people and then kind of just drive around the boat and just see what's happening. Once we were driving around, we saw like people like on the roofs just screaming like for help, like just at the top of their lungs from like blocks away. And it kind of just started getting put into perspective, like, okay, like we gotta go.
The Connors quickly learned search and rescue teams were totally inundated. That's when they made the decision to do whatever they could to help get those stranded to dry land.
All of a sudden, we see 2 City of Houston workers, one older man and a kind of a younger looking guy in just like very cheap life jackets hanging on to like the tip of a tree branch, and the water's rushing over them. They're just screaming like, help, help, like we can't swim. And so I immediately dive off the boat and swim over there. Thomas kicks the paddleboard over so I grab it, and I put both of them on there and I take them back to the boat. And when we got them on the boat, they were the most gracious people I've ever seen.
They also helped save pets, including some rabbits.
Although we never kept track, the numbers of people we saved varied from about 150 to even a little bit more. And the number of dogs we saved was about 5 to 7 and 4 rabbits.
When sun went down, we were still helping people till like 9 or 10 at night. And my parents didn't know where we were, like at all. And my grandma had called my mom and was like, hey, I see your kids on the news. Like, what's that all about? Like, are they in the boat? And they're like, yeah, like they're in the boat, like helping people, and glad you told us they're okay.
It was an exhausting but highly successful day for a few unsuspecting teenagers who were suddenly heroes.
I consider what we did on the boat could be heroic actions, but I don't consider myself any more of a hero than any of the first responders. We were lucky to have a boat to save people.
We were just doing what we had to do, and I think anybody else would have done it if they had the chance.
Nature can throw us misfortune at any time, but one thing is for sure. Whether it's a professional first responder or a courageous neighbor, a hero is always close by to step up. I'm Ginger Zee. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.